All right, we are here today to talk about Family Choice Program. The Arc of Ohio, obviously we're all advocates. We help families. We spend a lot of time in the State House. We do all kinds of things, but we also have two provider programs. And one of those is our Family Choice Program. And we have Chelsea and we have Brittany here, and they are the associate directors of the Arc of Ohio, and they coordinate and run the Family Choice Program. They're up in North Canton, Ohio, and they have an amazing staff. They have how many people do you guys have with you? Four, I guess?
Three under
Three.
us. Yep.
Three under you. And they do all things Family Choice. Family Choice has helped a lot of families, so this will be a great video to see if this would be beneficial to yours. Let's just kind of start off by, can you guys just talk a little about the history, the kind of what is Family Choice, where'd it come from kind of thing, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So Family Choice is a program where we, as the Arc of Ohio, serve as an agency provider. We work just the same as any other agency provider that you may have heard of before, except for we do take a unique approach to how we implement our agency provider program. And this was developed, as Josh said before, based on the fact that we are all advocates. We were having a lot of families contacting us, disclosing the need for providers and the fact that they weren't able to find providers. You know, their county boards were working diligently, putting their families on the portals through their county board services, and they just weren't receiving quality or the amount of providers that they needed to fulfill their hours within their waiver services. Yeah. So, but in that same sense, they did have, you know, family members or neighbors or friends that were willing to support their child with a disability or loved one with a disability. But they weren't interested in becoming an independent provider. They weren't interested in working for another agency. So they came to us and said, is there any way that you could help us? And so we thought about that for a long time. And then we came up with this program where we serve as the agency, but our unique spin on it is that we only hire staff that the family sends to us. So we do that by, we have an application on our website, but the families do all of that vetting, the recruiting, the identifying of those staff people themselves, either by looking within their own networks of their families. We have a lot of siblings that provide support to their sibling with a disability. We have some parents that provide supports to their children. And then we also have just some other community relationships where maybe it's a friend from church or a neighbor or just an ex-teacher or an aide from school. We have a lot of those relationships, and then they come to us, they apply through our program, and our commitment to those families and staff is that we will never require that staff person to work with other individuals if they choose not to. And we also commitment to our families that we're not going to send their staff to other families' homes and interfere with the schedule that they had committed to originally when entering our program.
Yeah, because you don't, in a traditional provider, you don't know who's going to show up at your door every day. And we have one self-advocate that's part of the ARC and People First, and he, says it pretty bluntly, but it's very true. It's like, I want to know who's going to show up through the door to wipe my butt every day. And some of the very more personal, more intimate kind of things that part of the daily living that you need supports with and help with, you're really going to want that to be one person that you kind of, you trust and and that kind of thing. And then, so the family choice is just, as Brittany's saying, the family chooses that person, and that person only, can only work with that. So so we're talking about the services and those supports. What supports are those? We talk about Family Choice Program. What's in that list of supports? Is it, homemaker personal care? Is there adult day services or voc rehab? What do those supports look like?
So we are certified for all three of the DD waivers, the level 1, the self, and the IO waiver. But service-wise, homemaker personal care or HPC, Ohio shared living, and HPC transportation, those are the three services that we provide to all of our clients. We do have folks that come to us and maybe don't know what their waiver type is, or maybe the waiver is new to them and they don't really know how to use it. So we can certainly help families and clients walk through all of those things and provide them with more information on how they can better access the waiver funds and what they can use them for. Once we have that information, we can kind of direct them in the right path as far as the Family Choice Program and what applications we need to receive from them and all of those good things. If that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about, if I'm a family and I'm looking at this program, for myself, my son, and I have someone that I would like to hire. That could be a family, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker, anyone, right? Obviously, they have to background check and training, that kind of thing. But what does life look like for my family? What does life look like for the individual, my son, but also for that DSP? What does that look like? What's my responsibility as a parent? What would I have to do with that DSP? What is that all? Can you just give us a little bit of insight into that journey?
So because the Arc of Ohio is serving people all across the state, first and foremost, our program is heavily electronic based. It's just for ease of convenience, not only on our end as administrators, but for all of our families and staff people as well. For all of the folks receiving HPC services, we do require that the client or the family identify what is called a family coordinator. And this is typically a parent or somebody within the family or support network that is very familiar with the client and their services, has maybe attended team meetings in the past, perhaps familiar with the ISP plan already. And that identified family coordinator is really the person that our staff has day-to-day or week-to-week communication with. We view them as our in-home supervisor, so to speak. So they would be the one setting the weekly schedule, discussing hours and needs and what community activities they might be working on or what the goals of the outcomes they're supposed to be working on. So we rely on the family coordinator as kind of like our middle person between all of our administration and our staff. Of course, we're always available to help our family coordinators and staff at any point in time, but we rely heavily on that family coordinator to really stay in communication with us and make sure that the DSP is following the ISP and providing services, according to the person's preferences and all of that.
To piggyback off of what Chelsea was saying, the primary piece is that individual specific, the individual service plan, the ISP. That is what drives the services and what dictates what that staff will be doing with that person with a disability. And we do participate in those meetings where those plans are developed. Chelsea generally attends those initial meetings to ensure that the services outlined in the plan meet our certification requirements and the ability of the staff person that we're looking to hire, and also meets the expectations of the family and what they are looking to get out of those services, with the DSP being added to that. So again, as Chelsea said, there's 88 counties in Ohio, and there's 88 different, ways of implementing and providing individual service plans. So we work together with the county board and the family and the staff person and our agency representatives to ensure that that plan is concise and written in a way that everybody's on the same page of what the expectations will be. And then Chelsea works to create documentation that captures that information that can be used as a way of understanding what was worked on during that day.
Yeah. And for the DSP and the Family Choice Program, what is the training and compliance like? I mean, as a family, go back to that situation where I'm the parent. Do I have to hold that documentation? Do I need to am I gonna have to get this training set up? How does that work in the Family Choice Program?
So, and I'll let Brittany speak to once they're already involved in the program, but just to kind of give an idea of what to expect when they're coming through the process, they can expect to be background checked and first aid CPR certified. There's some additional trainings that might be specific to the client receiving services. As Brittany mentioned, once we have the ISP and it's fully developed and we're identified in all of the areas that we will be, working on, we will create documentation that will be available electronically through a secure portal. Essentially, the DSP has a username and a password where they will log in and have access to that and the ISP at all times. And it's fairly simple to go through that form. And then staff, family coordinators, and our team receive copies of all of that. So anytime that the county may want to come to us and say, hey, we want to check in, see how services are going, see what progress is being made, we hold all of those master records. So our admins can send that off to the SSA for review. And then anytime the staff or family might inquire about, a status update, we again hold all of that documentation, and we will always be the ones responsible for anytime there's a revision or an addition to services, we'll be promptly making those changes. That way the staff and families don't have to worry about staying on top of those things.
So as we've kind of alluded to, Chelsea really takes the bulk of the lead up to the point when staff and families are initiated to start services. She helps the staff person, ensure that they meet all of the certification requirements and are eligible for hire. She works through the ISP development and creating that initial set of documentation. And so then what it looks like a day-to-day for staff and families, and can be a little convoluted because some of our staff are the families. So we always coach those situations to look at it as if you're wearing two different hats. You may be mom, but when you're being paid for services in terms of DD waiver services, the state, while allows for parents to be that provider, they do not view your responsibility to be any different than it would be if a person off the street was hired to do the same job. So it's important for our family members to recognize that they are going to be viewed as a direct service professional, regardless of their relationship to the client. And so we kind of try to coach them into thinking of, you're taking off your mom hat and you're putting on your DSP hat, and then you are required to follow the ISP as it's written and implement it in the direction in which it was developed. So by doing that, you start your shift or you start your day arriving to the client's home, or you're already there, and you switch off your parent hat, you put on your DSP hat, you clock in, you work on the things as outlined in the person's ISP. You may have, as Chelsea alluded to, there may be goals or objectives that you're working on, and you would do those tasks. And then once your shift is completed, you would go online to the secure portal that Chelsea gave you access to, and you would complete your daily documentation. And that documentation would then get converted into a billing record, which our billing team would submit to the state for reimbursement. And then we also use that documentation as your payroll records and timesheets to record the amount of time that you are working, or the number of days that you're working, the number of miles you've driven. And then you will be issued a biweekly paycheck for that, what you've recorded in that documentation in regards to days, hours, and miles provided. The other important component to mention at this part is that for all of our HPC services, there is an additional requirement called the electronic visit verification. And so that is a two-step process. The electronic visit verification is a in real time snapshot of when services are started and ended. So you can think of it more of like a punch card where you're clocking in and clocking out of a shift. And again, these are specifically for homemaker personal care hours only. And so you clock in and you clock out, and then your daily documentation still serves as your payroll and billing records, but the EVV is a Medicaid mandated requirement to verify that the documentation and times reported are matching with the electronic visit verification tools that, again, you'll be trained and given access to upon hire.
Yeah.
One of the other important things to note, if anybody's had first aid and CPR before, you know that with those certifications come renewal dates. So one of the things that Brittany does as our training and compliance specialist and her team, they will be tracking all of those expiration dates, and we do our very best to alert all of our staff, when they're 90 days out, 60 days out, 30 days out, that, hey, they have something coming up for renewal. Our team can help people find those renewal courses and kind of stay on top of things. As a self-directed program, we do ask that staff become aware of what those dates are and kind of take initiative to stay on top of those things. But as a support system, we do our very best to, again, alert staff when all of those things are coming due.
Yeah. And to that point, you are, after a certain amount of time of working for us, you are eligible for reimbursement for any upfront costs to get initiated into the program. And then also with any of those ongoing training requirements, if you have to go renew your CPR and first aid certification. And again, because of the self-directed nature of the program, we do not provide that training necessarily ourselves, even though we can help to find resources available in your area if needed. But you are eligible for reimbursement for any of those costs associated with those trainings.
Yeah. So let's talk some numbers, and then after that we'll talk about how to like where to start, right? So let's do HPC first. What's the starting rate? Is it different by county, or is it just with the program? What's the kind of starting that base rate for HPC?
Good question. So for HPC services, our base rate is currently $12.75. If the person receiving services has any add-ons that are approved by the county, so that would be like the behavior add-on or complex care add-on, that is an additional rate that can be added on to the hourly wage, and our agency passes 100% of any add-on down directly to the DSP that's working with that person. Now, the other flip of that is for Ohio Shared Living. The daily rate that the OSL provider receives is based on the county that they live in and the person's ODDP funding range. So it's hard to know from the beginning exactly how those numbers will all work out. But as the team works together and we clear up that information, we're happy to advise families on what that would look like.
Sure. And the shared living is a little bit different in that the DSP, the for one, it has to be families, right? But
Within our program, yeah.
they're not technically, within ours. Yeah, that's not a state rule, that's an ARC rule. But they're not technically employees, they're kind of contractors. Can you kind of just give a little bit of light toward that?
Yeah. So sorry, the IRS, and I'm not a tax expert, we are not tax experts here, but what we know is that in most cases, the IRS deems income earned through Ohio Shared Living as non-taxable, excludable income. So we make all of our shared living providers contractors instead of regular employees. That way we do not have to take federal taxes out of their payroll checks, and we can issue them a 1099 at the end of the year. And again, another important thing to understand is that the HPC services are hourly, whereas the OSL services are paid in a daily rate. And that's because the shared living rule identifies those services as kind of like a 24-hour service, so to speak.
Yeah. Good. If I want to get started, where do I go? What do I do?
First place to stop is our website, thearcofohio.org, and viewing our Family Choice Program page. There's a lot of great information on there about the entire program, the requirements, all of that. But this may be a good opportunity to talk about some of our processing staff that work here in our office as well. because if you do have any specific questions related to the application or the process of applying, we do have, obviously Chelsea and I are both available to answer questions, but we also do have 3 other amazing ladies that work with us here and that help with all of that. So if you have any questions about the applications themselves, there are 2 that would need to be completed. One on behalf of the person served, the person who has the waiver awarded to them. That is called our enrollee application. And if you have questions specifically about that part of the program, then we would direct you to Kayla Montag, who is again in our office, and she helps families with that aspect of it. And then the staff application would be completed on behalf of any applicable staff applying for that same person. And if you had any specific questions related to that aspect of the application, we would direct you to Christina Pelfrey, who helps staff work through all of that process and securing trainings and processing the paperwork with that.
And while it's outside of the application processing itself, as Brittany mentioned, there's also a 3rd person here in our office, Sarah Larson, and she specifically oversees electronic visit verification. She does other things as well, but she's our go-to person and our expert on EVV, and she's always communicating with staff. You know, we have definitely heard feedback from DSPs that sometimes EVV doesn't work the way that it should be. Sometimes we receive errors. So we're constantly reconciling some of that data. We have the ability to make corrections or manual updates into the SAM data system. So Sarah's our go-to for all of those things.
Sarah helps me a lot with the like notifying staff of their compliance requirements as well. So when your CPR and first aid is, you know, maybe 30 to 60 days out from expiring, you may receive an email from Sarah to let you know that that's happening and that the expectation is that you would complete a new recertification before the current one expired.
Yeah, good. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you both for giving us a glimpse into the Family Choice Program. You can always reach, go to the website we talked about, right? thearcofOhio.org. And you can see on the top, you can click the Family Choice Program. And a lot of information there, as Brittany mentioned. But you could also give a phone call to the Family Choice Program as well, 614-487-4720. And it's a lot. There's so many different scenarios. There's so many different, just call, have a conversation. And we certainly love to help you out and see if it'll work for your family. So thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Brittany. Appreciate it very much so. And we'll have to have you maybe come back on again sometime to kind of go into some of the deeper workings and some of the lovely scenarios that can happen for sure.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Josh.